Today I'm here with Yolanda Mazik, and she is a native Pennsylvanian and a graduate of the University of Pittsburgh. She relocated to Washington, D.C. to manage the Shared Horizons Pooled Special Needs Trust in January of 2005. As the executive director, Yolanda, along with her board of directors and staff, grew the trust from deposits totaling $326,000 to over $45 million, expanding its service reach to cover the capital region and implementing the third-party community trust as an option for families developing their estate planning documents. She has over 30 years of nonprofit experience, primarily in the fields of substance use, criminal justice, and disabilities. She worked as a certified addictions counselor and intervention specialist for 9 years before accepting the position as director of the neighborhood-based Family Intervention Center in Sharon, Pennsylvania. During her 12 years as director, she developed new initiatives for delinquent youth, their families, and other at-promise populations, preserving and supporting families in crisis. Yolanda is honored to work with a dedicated staff and committed board of directors that embrace Shared Horizons person-centered trust management model. And I lost my second page, but
That's okay.
That's a little background on Yolanda. We're happy to have you here with us today. In lieu of our transition training, I'm recording some interviews with the people who typically present. Can you tell us what agency you work for and what services you provide?
Certainly. Thank you so much for providing the platform. It's ingenious for you to think that way and to actually create an opportunity for your parents to still get the information. So that's awesome. So I work for Shared Horizons. Shared Horizons is the nonprofit created to specifically manage pooled special needs trusts. In order to manage a pooled special needs trust, Congress says that you must be a 501c3. So that's why Shared Horizons had to be developed or created to manage the pooled trusts in the DC metro area.
Got it. And can you say more about what a pooled special needs trust is? I'm not sure all our families will be familiar with that.
Sure. So trusts have been around forever. And typically we associate trusts with people of wealth. Wealthy people establish trusts for their children. When they reach the age 26, they have access or whatever the guidelines are. But in 1993, Congress created a statute that allowed people with disabilities to transfer assets into special needs trusts, and that money would not be counted when determining their ability or their eligibility to continue to receive public benefits. The way that the trust works is that it's vehicle or an instrument that is drafted. And for Shared Horizons purposes, we have one master trust document that was drafted and that was pre-approved by Social Security and Medicaid. So the nice part about using a pooled special needs trust is that you don't have to draft the document. You don't have to hire the attorney to draft the document and to then get that document approved if it's a self-funded trust by Social Security and Medicaid. That part is already done. For the purposes of what we're talking about today, though, most of the parents that may view this video, they're not necessarily interested in the self-funded trust, but they're interested in the third-party trust. The third-party trust is the same as a regular self-funded trust, except that the trust was actually established and funded by a third party. So that third party can be a parent, grandparent, neighbor, cousin, aunt, anyone other than the beneficiary who is the recipient of the trust funds. So the third party trust, when a parent establishes that, they only need one, and they would go through the process of working with an attorney, and I'm probably getting ahead of some of the questions that you may have. But they would work with an attorney for that attorney to help them get all of their paperwork in order. And then that trust would be a part of that estate plan that they create. And I know that you have other people that are going to talk about estate planning, but I just wanted to try to create a big picture for parents to understand how a special needs trust would benefit and work with their estate planning piece.
Got you. And so to back up a little more and kind of explain, even to break it down even more. So a trust is um, money that is set aside to help care for the child when they become an adult, correct?
It doesn't have to be when they become an adult. The trust can be established at any age to benefit anyone, that as long as they have a disability. So my thing is that a lot of parents, as soon as they find out that their child has a disability, many of them will seek an attorney and they will create a special needs trust on behalf of that child. But yes, the funds are there to supplement whatever benefits that child, whether it's a minor or an adult, will have during their lifetime to ensure that their quality of life needs are met.
Got you. And just because I'm aware of this, but to put it in the video, so if people watch this video, they have all the information. But it's my understanding that another important part of having a trust is so that the income does not disrupt maybe their benefits that they're receiving, such as SSI.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So there are actually three means tested benefits that an adult that has a disability may need during their lifetime. The first is SSI. SSI is supplemental security income. You can't have more than $2,000 to become eligible for that benefit. That's the cash benefit that they will receive. Right now, the cash benefit amount, I believe, is $783. So every month they would receive that SSI benefit. The second benefit is Medicaid. If they don't have any other insurance, and depending upon the jurisdiction they serve, because Medicaid is state managed, every state has certain guidelines. So for DC, they can't have more than $4,000, but for Maryland, they can't have more than $2,500. However, if they have SSI says they can only have 2,000, so they follow SSI rules. So there's SSI, there's Medicaid, and then the third benefit that an adult may need during their lifetime is subsidized housing. And subsidized housing has their own protocol, their own rules, and their own regulations that we have to also follow when one of our beneficiaries has that benefit as well. So if you establish a special needs trust and you transfer money in, as long as the trustee follows the rules and regulations when making disbursements that SSI would put upon us, Medicaid would put upon us, and subsidized housing would put upon us, those funds will not jeopardize those benefits that they're receiving.
Great. Thank you for explaining that in more detail. And so, as you know, most of our students have disabilities. What advice do you have for parents whose children are disabled and maybe getting ready to transition to adulthood, or perhaps they're thinking about what that's going to look like when that time comes?
Wow, that's a loaded question because I'm sure that parents, as they're watching this, they're probably feeling a bit overwhelmed because every time they talk to someone, they're saying that there's something else they need to do in preparation for the transition. So just to put it simply, I would first say, just take a deep breath and take it one step at a time. The first thing is, and the most important probably, is to make sure that the services that they've identified for their adult person transitioning is going to be a service that will benefit them, so that they can have as much independence as possible. And that is working with, whether it's DDA, DSS if they're in Maryland, but just working with an agency, or St. Coletta's, to help with that transition. But working with an agency that has that expertise and that they feel comfortable with, that will allow them to think outside the box as they begin that transitioning. And then once they take that breath and they're listening to what the professionals are saying to them is to assist them with the transition process. And then once they have that narrowed down, then the next step would be, okay, so they're good. I have a place for them to be, whether they're going to remain in your home and they're going to be in day programs, or they're going to actually transition to a provider agency in a host home, or a CRF, or there's so many options. But once you get that narrowed down, because that is the most important thing, the next thing is to really think about how you can assist them in enhancing their quality of life. And the way that you do that, first and foremost, is taking care of yourself first. And I know that that's a bizarre for me to say, but it is a reality that a lot of times parents think, okay, I have to make sure that my adult child or my child that has special needs, they're taken care of. I have money set aside for them. But I'm saying to you that the first thing that you should think about is yourself. You got to make sure that you have things in place so that if something should happen to you, you first are taken care of. That means making sure that you have a living will, making sure that you have a will, making sure that you have things put in place so that if you are unable to make decisions for yourself, that those decisions are, or someone is given the authority to make those decisions on your behalf for you, and then of course second, your child. And then once that is in place, or to prepare for that portion, it would be important for you to maybe reach out to an attorney that understands estate planning, because that's basically what you're talking about. You're talking about planning for your long-term or living will, uh, your year. Oh, I'm baffled here. I'm tongue-tied. Your long-term planning for yourself as well as for your loved ones. And that doesn't just mean your loved one that has a disability. You've got to really think very broad about your estate planning. And then once you get that attorney's job is to make sure that there are three areas. There's paper, there's money, and there's people. So the paper piece is that attorney will help you create your living will, your will, any organized paperwork that you need to do. Then they're going to also help you think outside the box as far as money is concerned. Like, how are you going to pay for your services and then the services for your loved ones, and not just the person with the disability? And you can do that through establishing a number of vehicles, but one for what I'm talking about is the third-party trust that you can create. And then, of course, the third part that attorney may work with you on is people, developing a network, developing a support system to make sure that your children, your adult children, and specifically or especially the children that you have that have special needs, that there is a network in place that will be able to support them in a way that you would be able to support them if you were still able and capable.
Great. And I think that's a really good summary of all the things people should be thinking about as their children are aging and getting older. So I appreciate you breaking that down. And if a parent were interested, I know, so for your purposes, you're talking about a third-party trust and as an option for establishing a trust. If a parent were interested in doing that and working with you, how would they go about applying for your assistance or the assistance of your agency?
Sure. It starts with a telephone call or an email. They can call our number 202-448-1460, or they can send us an email at info at shared-horizons.org. Hopefully you will provide that information. And it just starts with a telephone call or a conversation. What I would do is when they call, they would most likely speak to me. And I would just like to have a conversation about what their desires are, what they plan, what they envision. Because sometimes they come to us first and they haven't done the other pieces that they need to do to actually complete the estate plan. So once we talk to them and we get a little more information, then we can provide them with the list of estate planning attorneys that they can work with. We can provide them with a list of agencies if they haven't gotten to that point yet. So, but it all starts with the conversation, telephone call or an email. And then I would sit down with them. They can actually do and create the third-party trust simultaneously as they work with the attorney to create their estate plan. But one of the questions that I often get, especially when I come to St. Coletta's and we speak, is that parents, after listening to everyone, and they're, we're all saying, you've got to do this estate plan, you've got to create a pooled special needs trust, and you have parents that are concerned because they're thinking, well, I don't have a whole lot of assets. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And I just want to say again, I say this to parents all the time: take a deep breath and breathe, because there are things that you're not really considering. So there could be that you have a house or home that once you are no longer breathing on this earth, that something has to happen with that home. So that's a vehicle, that's an instrument that you can use to fund a special needs trust. You have insurance policies that if you are employed or through your employer, or your personal insurance policies that you can establish or that you can purchase. But there's also, for third-party trusts, which is wonderful because you only need one, is I say to parents all the time, once you establish that third-party trust, make sure you're telling people that you have it established, so that everyone that loves your son or daughter that has a special needs and they want to leave them in their will or name them in their insurance policy, that they understand that you already have an instrument set up and that this is what they need to list as the beneficiary. So it would be, if you use Shared Horizons third-party community trust for benefit of, or FBO for their child. And because parents are thinking that they're the sole people that need to provide this financial support or supplemental support for their loved ones, but they're not. There are other people out there within the family or friends that if they just knew that it was an option, that they would include that in their estate plan or their insurance policies as well.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you said that, because I know something I've always taken away from your trainings, the ones I've been to in the past, is that it sounds like you and your agency really work with families to think of creative ways to make sure that they're able to fund this trust, or work with you to find creative ways to do this. So I'm glad you said that it's not just an option for people who have money in the bank, but there's other ways to do this as well.
Absolutely.
And I don't think I have any other questions. Is there anything else you wanted to share with parents before we end this today?
I think the other thing is just making sure that whether they use our trust or they go with another trust, just making sure that because it can be a long process. I mean, some parents, when they're working with us or I'm working with them to establish a third-party trust, sometimes it takes like 4, 5, 6 months, sometimes a year for them to complete. Because some of the questions that we ask in the document, it really makes you think about, oh, I hadn't thought about that. It's in the document. Not only do we want to know how the trust may be funded, but we want to know if something happens to the beneficiary, who would be the beneficiaries of what remains in the trust. Because when you're establishing the document as a parent, you tell us how we're going to disperse funds should something happen to the beneficiary, should they pass away and there's money remaining in the trust. So you've got to think that through. You've also got to think through who's going to be the liaison. And that's difficult for parents. That's probably the most difficult piece that parents have to think about, because most of the time, when they're establishing a third-party trust, for many parents, that means that they are no longer here. Mm-hmm. That they have passed. That means that someone else has to step in and assist their loved one, their son or daughter, granddaughter, grandchild, with establishing, or not establishing, but accessing the trust. And that means that you have to identify or think outside the box. Now, if they're with the provider agency, it's a little easier because the provider agency would most likely be that liaison. But what if they're living independently? And what if they don't have an agency involved? There has to be someone that can assist them with accessing the trust, making sure that someone is attending the quality of life planning that we have, the budgeting meetings that we have, making sure that someone is able to complete the request forms as needed. So that person is what we call the liaison or the representative. They don't have authority over the trust, but their sole purpose is to make sure that the trust can be accessed, or assisting the beneficiary in accessing the trust.
Great. Thank you for adding that. And I thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm so
Sure.
glad we're able to get this information to parents because it's so important. And I know the parents at our school really appreciate it. So thank you so very much. And I hope that you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.